This is actually what Walt Disney wanted. He wanted a resort that was designed to be a self-contained community. He wanted it to have its own infrastructure and services, which included transportation, utilities, and waste management, which Walt Disney World in Florida definitely does, as I've mentioned before. But I just find it interesting that this was always Walt Disney's vision and what he wanted. I think he really found that as a problem when he had Disneyland in California. From what I've read and researched, he really started to envy the fact that people would visit Disneyland, but then they would have to go home at the end of the day, normally limiting their trip there, limiting their stay, and also limiting the magic that he had as well. Obviously, Walt Disney could control everything inside the park and the feelings and the vibes that were in there, and made sure that everybody had the best experience that they possibly could. But after leaving them gates at the end of the day, they would have to either drive home or go to their hotel, and you just couldn't control what sort of experience they would have out of that. So over time, Walt found that to be a massive challenge and barrier, and he realized how amazing it would be if he could have his own hotels, his own services, his own shops, where that magic could continue on. And again, you could go for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and not have to leave the Disney magic if you didn't want to. Something else which I found interesting was that apparently Walt Disney originally wanted to build Disneyland, which is now in California. He actually wanted to build that in Florida to begin with. However, at that time, he found problems with acquiring the necessary land, so he kind of stuck a pin in it and built it in California. But like I said, as time went on, he actually did realize that even though he loved the California park, there was its own limitations there as well. So once Walt Disney realized he had this problem with Disneyland in California, he had kind of done everything that he could do with it. He started looking for other land across the USA which he could develop onto, create a new set of Disneyland parks, and also just expand what he could offer, as he was really interested in having this more immersive experience. So he looked in several locations on the east coast of the USA, which included places like New Jersey and Virginia, which is crazy to think that Walt Disney World could be in them sorts of areas. It just seems like, I don't know, it was always meant to be in Florida, but obviously there were loads of other places where it could have been. But in the end, Disney ultimately settled for Florida due to its warm climate, relatively low land prices, as well as how accessible the location was via car as well. There is a famous video of Walt Disney talking about the Florida project, and I think it aired on like national television at the time, but you can see it on YouTube if you want to. Basically where he's just talking about his plans for Walt Disney World, and he mentions the fact that Florida is the perfect place to travel by automobile, which I absolutely love when he mentions that. It really sets the tone for the era that the Walt Disney World company was building Walt Disney World. And just honestly, it makes me smile every single time because it just shows how forward thinking Walt Disney was with the expansion of technology. Obviously it has come on so much since, but he really loved technology and valued it and wanted to use it as much as he could. He wasn't scared by it at all. And yeah, I just always love that little sentence about the automobiles because I just find it so fun. Obviously no one refers to them as automobiles now, but at the time that was like the technical, like futuristic word they were using for it. So I just find it so fun, and I love it every time I watch that clip. So Walt Disney began purchasing land in Florida for the development of Walt Disney World in the early 1960s, and by the end of about several years or so, he actually accumulated around 27,000 acres of land, which the Walt Disney Company now own, and that has since become Walt Disney World. There have been bigger purchases of land in Florida since, but at the time, this was the biggest purchase of land that anyone had ever made by a massive margin, which made it such a great opportunity for Florida as well, and their tourism too. And the land that was purchased in the end was purchased for an average price of $200 per acre. This was much lower than the going rate for many other lands and properties in the area, and this is mainly because of the quality of the land. So before Walt Disney bought it, this land was actually agricultural land, so it was mainly used for cattle and wasn't very developed at all. Obviously, we are also in Florida, and if you have visited before, you know know, it has absolutely torrential rain sometimes. It never really lasts very long, but it does have massive downpours pretty regularly. And this land was also very well known to flood and created wastelands and swamps across the whole area that Disney bought. And when he was buying it, many people considered that it would be unsuitable to build on just because the land was so damaged and wet and not very nice to walk across. And obviously it also had high water levels and poor drainage, which made the swamps. But Disney, however, didn't listen to what anyone was saying or recommending to him. He saw potential in it and loved the land, loved the location. So he invested in the land. He probably also really loved the price tag on it as well, because not a lot of people wanted it, and decided that this would be the new home for Walt Disney World to be built.